afternoon, everyone.
There you go.
What time of day it is. Glad you're here for spending some time with us. I'm Charlotte Alverson, and I'm the director for YTP at the U of O.
And do we have Sally?
Yeah, hi, I'm Sally Simich from the Department of Ed, and I sit on the YTP Management Board.
All right. So today, let me share my screen here. Today is really meant for Q&A around the 21-23 YTP Intergovernmental Agreement Amendments. I'm going to quickly review what we went through in December, not in as much detail, but just to kind of get a foundation for us and for those who weren't on that call. If we need to go back to anything in more depth, we can, but this will just be sort of a quick overview, and then there will be plenty of time for question and answer. I do want to give a quick disclaimer that in my newness, and as this is my first amendment process, if I can't answer today, what we'll do is we'll capture questions and we will get answers back to everybody quickly. So there's my disclaimer. Hopefully this is useful for everybody and that we meet your needs. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. All right, so reviewing, repetitive here, but the great news is we're not doing an RFGP or procurement process. We are amending for existing sites only. This is not a competitive process. So it's going to be much more simplified, hopefully still meaningful. There are 4 documents that we need each site to submit. There's a biennium reflection, a budget narrative, a budget sheet, and then the letter of commitment or letter of support, sometimes it's called, from vocational rehabilitation branch manager. We do have updated fillable versions of those on the YTP website for both Voc Rehab and Tribal Voc Rehab. Thanks to Julie, I believe, in Pendleton for the Tribal VR version. So the biennium reflection is just a summary of demographic data and 5 reflective questions that should look familiar because they're from the prior RFGP. We want to make sure that you know how to answer this second box in the demographic data in your YTP database. It's under site summary, and you come down and look here, and this is where you find that answer. The budget narrative is the same as last biennium, this biennium right now. So we're just asking you to describe in detail all of the sections here: student-based transition specialist, FTE, salaries and wages, fringe benefits, and your other costs. In the other cost section, we might be looking for a little bit more detail than has been there in the past, especially if you're planning to pay students. The budget sheet is updated from last.
Michelle, just a second. There's a thing here from Sharon saying she couldn't hear.
Uh-oh.
Is everybody?
She can hear now.
Okay, good. Thank you. Sorry for that interruption. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't other people.
And I feel like I'm going through this really fast, but it is a review from last time. But if you weren't here last time, this is going to feel really fast. So I'm open to feedback about slowing down and going in greater depth if needed. Just speak up. This is meant to have feedback and be interactive, even with 147 people.
Okay. And Michelle, Jesse, just as by way of reminder, the December call is recorded and it is online and accessible through the YTP website under resources, past training events. So.
Thank you. The new budget sheet breaks out benefit rate from insurance rate, because oftentimes benefit rate is a percentage and then insurance is like a flat fee based on collective bargaining agreement. So we got that feedback from business managers and made that update for this go around. The second tab in the budget sheet is just an optional tool for you to use if it's helpful. You would have to just plug in your own rates and everything there, but you don't have to use it if you don't want to either.
Michelle, we're getting a few people. It would be nice if you could slow down a little bit.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Shireen, is this where you wanted to go back and see adjustments, sorry, to the budgets?
Yeah, and if you don't mind, can I just clarify the question for a second?
Yeah.
So if my budget adjustment question is sort of multifaceted, if a particular YTP, if we have, you know, in Lane County, we have 12 sites, if there's a change at one site, but also sort of larger, any sort of budget adjustments, can those be made? Is this, there's
Yep.
room for, there's room for that, I guess.
So
That's my
this,
question.
I mean, this would make an assumption that there's no more than 15 sites in any,
Sorry, I mean schools. I used the wrong terminology.
or
12
schools
for
within a
our
site.
site.
Yep.
Yes.
So you can have, I mean, these can be separate, so, or they can all be the same. So there's room for it to be different. Say, like for instance, I live up here in Multnomah County. If MESD held a contract, or if Portland Public held a contract, and for some reason they paid people differently, maybe maybe the first FTE is 0.75 and the second one is 1.0, and then they have a halftime person, you can go ahead and differentiate that line by line here.
And I guess the reason I'm sorry to go down this rabbit hole, and maybe there's not a need to do this, but if there are adjustments made to what was in the last biennium grant.
Mhm.
So for example, if a school had a 0.5 FTE, but decides that they in fact are moving to a 0.4 FTE or a 0.75 FTE, or how is that, are those allowable?
So that's a sort of a little bit of a different question from my perspective that I will get to in just a moment as one of the updates. So we're sort of phasing this out. Phase one is right now what we're going through, and it's amending current sites at current FTE only.
Okay.
So we don't want to add additional FTE for a whole site. Now within a site, you can move your own FTE around a little bit, but we don't want to expand the total FTE. So if you had like 3 transition specialists, this, oops, right here would say 3.0, and you could have 6.5 people, or you could have 3 1.0 people. But this, we just don't want to expand it at this point in time, the total FTE.
When you say at this point in time, what do you mean by that?
Just like school districts, VR won't know its budget. It won't be finalized until June. And so we're going to stay stagnant right now, with the possibility of staying that way forever, depending on what the budget looks like in June. If things look really healthy in June, then we might look at expanding current sites if there was interest. And if we had the availability and there was interest, then we could look at considering new sites as well. All of that is not yet determined, but we decided to think about it in sort of a 3-phased approach, with phase 1 for amendments at current sites being at current FTE levels only right now.
So the idea, if we have a rural school in Lane County that's not currently in our consortium and would like to be part of our YTP site, that cannot be entertained right now. Is that what I'm hearing?
If they're an addition in FTE, correct.
Okay.
I'm seeing Michelle has a budget question also. Maybe just let's wait and see get through that, and then if it's covered, and then we could go back. I'll make note, Michelle, that you have one, and if it isn't answered, we can answer it later.
Okay. Thanks, Mary Jo, for that. I like that approach. Okay. The letter of commitment is on the YTP website. It is fillable. That's our little update there. And I'll show you an image of the YTP website where all the documents are that you need. And the idea here is that somebody is from your site is having a conversation with the VR branch manager and really just talking about what your student base is, talking about the need to have that protected set aside time for the transition specialist and VRC to collaborate, and maybe even landing on something, if not landing on something specific, just at least getting the commitment for that. And then they sign it and you include it in your application packet for amendment. And virtual or electronic signatures are totally fine for this whole process as well.
So Sarah Lynn on that note said, let folks know that branch managers can provide a digital signature.
Yes, so I speak with this audience and then I speak with VR branch managers, kind of back and forth. So they're hearing it from me, but I mean, at the same time, go ahead and feel free to say, we have it, you know, we have it on record that electronic signatures are allowable.
And Kia, we'll get back to you on yours. I didn't lose yours.
Okay. So here's our timeline. In December, we did the initial release. Just of the plan, the timeline, the documents. Here we are right now, January 11th. This is Q&A. February 12th is when we want those 4 documents submitted to me via email. We want to have our negotiation meetings completed by March 31st with all of the sites. And then I'll go into a little bit more detail. June 25th, we want to have all the amendments signed by both the agency and the site, so VR and the site, the YTP sites, prior to starting work on July 1. So here we are today. This is non-competitive. We can be communicative and collaborative throughout, which is really helpful. We all feel extremely grateful for that, and hope that it works for you too. And if we can't answer live, one of us will be back in contact with you afterwards. We have had a couple of common questions come up so far. And I think that we're covering them already. No expansion of FTE in current sites right now. No new sites right now. Yes, electronic signatures will work.
So that brings up Kia's question. Kia, did that answer what you were asking?
Yes, thank you.
And I just want to make sure everybody understands, like, the goal of everybody is to have YTP in every school. With budgets being so uncertain right now, there was a lot of just, we want to be overly cautious and not expanding a site right now and then not being able to fund it in the future or anything like that, or thinking, assuming something would come in June and then not be able to deliver. So we just chose to go ahead and wait on that. Okay, paying students is a common question that's coming up. So I just put a few extra slides in here about this. And so what I want to say is for YTP, it is very new to be doing this on a large scale. I think we have 2 sites where this has been approved consistently in the past, which is a really small number, obviously, right? So we know what's been approved. Pardon my typo right there. I added this really last minute. And in the contracts where it's been approved, it's written in under other costs payable to students at a rate that equals minimum wage or over per hour, not to exceed $10,000 total for paying students. So it's a small amount, and it's really only intended to be for limited amounts of time for a small group of students. In the 2 cases that have been approved, 1 district uses a temp agency, 1 district pays the students directly. And we're not sure what else is possible yet because we haven't tested it. And I'm new enough that I'm going to have to take it through policy to see what's allowable. And so I appreciate everybody's patience in learning together for that. Some considerations with this, if you are considering paying students, is that it must be an integrated setting at a rate that equals minimum wage or higher per hour. We want districts to use this guidance that's posted and spell out for us how you're not going to be setting up a mock sheltered workshop. And that link will take you right to ODE with some self-assessments and guidance that's pretty easy to follow. If it's an integrated site, YTP dollars can only cover eligible and potentially eligible students. So that can get a little bit tricky. And maybe if you're working with gen ed students or a CTE class, how do the other students get paid? Just some considerations to think about. And so I want to go ahead and take a moment here, a little pause. And I know that there's probably quite a few questions about this topic. And Garrett, if you could capture the questions, we'll answer if we can. And if not, we'll get back to you with answers. But I do want to hear feedback from the field on what your questions are around paying students.
Hi, I'm Rochelle from Tillamook, and our question around it was, what would be a reasonable amount to put in that budget line when we're trying to write it all out? So we weren't sure how much to put in. I know during summer a couple of years ago there was that special grant, and I think it was like $5,000.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked about this a little bit, and right now we're comfortable with saying a limit of $10,000 for the biennium. So,
okay.
You know, that could be $5,000 per year, or however you go ahead and choose to spread that out. And Charlotte was helping us think through that this morning, that really, if you're looking at around $15 an hour, that's $660 for the whole biennium, or 660 hours for the whole biennium, spread up between however many students. So I just want to mention once again that it's intended to be a small, focused group of students, limited time, not like a permanent position with your district or something like that. That would be out of the scope of what we're able to fund.
And we don't have to specify on there, do we? I guess I'm asking, do we need to specify on there that it could be used for like during the school year as well as summer?
I mean, I love all the detail you can give, but if you don't have that yet, then you could say something like it could be, we have a meeting, you know, we'll use our core team meeting and get feedback from what you just described, sort of what your process and plan is.
Currently, we are using it during the school year because there's not schooling. So we're using it during this time, but once we go back to school full time, then so hopefully next year we would be able to use the remaining of it for summer.
Okay. And you know, when we have our negotiation meetings, if you still have lack of clarity, that's when we can really kind of think about your situation as a team and tweak anything if needed within your application packet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Martha, are you feeling, you had said, could you use paid internships for a total amount, say $500 for a student, as long as it meets the minimum wage requirement? Is your question answered? Josh Marks had the same
No, not really. Because, well, one of the things that I was thinking of is it for districts trying to hire and so forth, there gets to be all kinds of complicated. I went through this in Redmond. We hired a bunch of students. I kind of get the whole way of doing this. But one of the things that I'm thinking about within Sisters, because you also then have the whole discussion of like, why are you paying students with disabilities through YTP for work when we don't have other paid employment opportunities for kids with no disabilities? But there may be some paid internships that become a little more politically viable to sell to a district versus trying to get somebody on an hourly paid employment. I don't know, I'm just thinking through some of my previous experience and I kind of feel like a stipend or a paid internship might be a little bit easier. Because you're asking, if you put $10,000 into the budget, the district has to match that at a third. So you got all kinds of, it's easy to say, go ahead and do that and put that in, but it's a harder sell on the other end when you have a budget, districts who may be facing some significant budget cuts in this next biennium.
Absolutely. And I want to make sure people are not hearing that we're asking districts to do this. It's just something that is newly allowable on a larger scale. Or maybe it always was allowable, but maybe it just wasn't kind of talked about transparently. So if you're not comfortable doing it, if you don't have it, we're not asking people to do it all. There's just been a lot of questions. So we thought we would go ahead and address some of the most common questions and allow time for even more questions to come in because it's just so new. So I don't want districts to feel pressured that they have to be doing this at all. The RFA still exists, which is that special little set aside grant that pays students directly as well. So
Yeah, but that's really convoluted.
yeah.
Sarah Lynn, do you want to ask yours? What your question is?
Sure, I was having trouble getting unmuted, but the other thing with that I think people have to think about is not just what we're paying the kids, but there's all the payroll deductions and payroll tax that's on addition to what you pay the student. So if you're doing a paid program, it's not just the $15 an hour you're paying the kid. You've got payroll taxes on top of that.
Yep.
And I think it's also set up for a small, like limited, it's $5,000 a year. That's not a lot of money. And if you break it down, it's 330 hours in a year. So how do you tie it to something that you're doing that maybe is internships, or use it in a constructive way? And maybe each kid gets 12 hours so you can do it. I don't know. It's just an opportunity that you can think about. You can think of how you can use it, or if you even want to.
So how are districts that are doing it covering, workman's comp and all the things that the employer has to cover?
So that's the research that we're going to do and need to get back to you on.
Because I've not done it because of that very reason, because there's a whole other expense mode that goes along with that for liability. So
I can tell you how we do it at Tillamook. Here at Tillamook, we've hired the students and the district pays them. Like we have a special, we call it YTP work group. And so they have to apply for a job with the district. It's not as extensive as if somebody was going to apply. So we don't do like the fingerprinting and background checks and all like that. But they do have to fill out an application and their I-9 and their W-4 and their new federal W-4. And so we do that process with them, and then we just calculate. So we pay them at minimum wage and then calculate it to be, I think it ends up being like $13 or something like that is the cost. But they turn in a time card just like our district employees do. And we just do it very short term. Like for right now, we have a boy he is the sanitizer at our school. So he goes and he sanitizes the restrooms and then like the outside door handles. But our goal is that he will get employed when the district has, like, they're working on funding for a half-time custodian. So that's kind of how we're doing it. Kind of like what rehab does. We are paying the full wage.
Cool. Michelle has been doing this for a while and has another budget question. Michelle Pruden. So why don't you go ahead, Michelle?
We hire, just to piggyback off that, we hire kids in the summer through our grant, and the title is Summer Student Worker, and it's a paid work experience. So it's not a paid internship because it's not an internship, it's a work experience. And then to make sure that it's not a sheltered workshop, my students work one-on-one with a supervisor from their chosen department, IT, food service, janitorial, maintenance, and grounds, and custodial, and they get to interview. They go through the same interview process that our district employees do with a ranking system, and they do have to do their background checks. We just get it done for free through the sheriff's office, and they have to do all the same paperwork that and training that a summer district employee would do. And we also calculate it the same way. as the other school district, including the workman's comp and FICA and all of that into the hourly cost per student. And so I would encourage you guys to talk to your business manager because they can give you like an amount per student per hour, and then it makes it so much easier to work your budgets. But my question is on this same topic. My district is a little bit nervous because they're not sure what's going to happen. Could we write in the $10,000 to hire kids over the summer in theory? But if we couldn't use it this summer because of COVID, shift that over to the following year. My superintendent is in full support, but just wants to make sure that we can be flexible with that spending if we are not able to hire students due to COVID.
So what will remain the same is just like always, if we have unspent dollars, then we want districts to be able to go ahead and use those creatively. I want to make really clear that like the flexibility that we've allowed right now with that yes test and the guidance is only momentarily right now, and it ends this biennium. If we find ourselves in a situation with COVID longer term, then we would be revisiting that. So yes, spending it down in ways that are different, it might be a little bit of an amendment to your budget, is a possibility, like it always has been. Quite as flexibly as we're allowing it right now may or may not be, but I can't comment on that. Does that make sense?
It would be used for the same exact purpose, just shifted to the second year to give us more time.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the other follow-up question you wanted to know about was, is it okay to not write in a service like that for this summer because we're not sure, and just write it in for the second year of the biennium or anything like that? So if we choose to be more frugal, I guess, and more protective of our dollars, could we not write something in year one, but make sure to write it in year two?
You could do either of those.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Alexis, why don't you ask your question? I think it might be appropriate for everybody.
Sure. I have two questions. So my first question was, when we say integrated, and I think we've talked about this so many times, but it still kind of continues to be a little bit of a gray area. But for like a student ran business, let's say, would these students that are potentially eligible, would that count as integrated? So would we need to have gen ed students mixed with students that have IEPs, or could we have students that maybe have a 504 or could be potentially eligible for an IEP? And maybe we work with them under pre-ETs already, mixed with kids that have existing IEPs.
I see it as students with disabilities working with students without disabilities. That's what integrated means to me.
Yeah,
and I know that any student without a disability, I guess, could become, could be identified at some point.
But I mean, how do you define disability? Are you guys defining it by they have an IEP and they're diagnosed under this IEP, there's a diagnosis, or is the student potentially eligible? Because students that struggle, they're not always eligible for IEPs.
I'm going to see if this takes us to the link, because this guidance is really, really wonderful.
The other thing in there, Aaron Brownlee is talking about sheltered workshop environmental phase. So that I think we'll bring that all into it too.
So
yes, you want to make sure that you're looking at the sheltered workshop documents, because you don't want students working and doing things in isolation by themselves and not being integrated with students without disabilities. So, and it's true, Alexa, there can be students that are potentially eligible that can be a part of that student business. And then there can be person with that have eligibility for special ed.
So this link takes you to this determination of mock sheltered workshop flow chart, which I think is really a very helpful tool. And then there's also right underneath it, and this presentation will be posted on the YTP website. My internet's being slow all of a sudden.
Martha has another question about do the students who are not identified qualify to apply for the hourly pay as well? Wouldn't we have to do that if we are really saying that it is competitive and integrated?
Hold on.
Yeah, and that would be like the ultimate goal because you want gen ed students. But sometimes that's tricky in school districts. It can be really difficult. You would think it wouldn't be, but it really can be.
Yeah. So these two tools are really intended to help you sort of walk through those questions with consistency. Yeah.
Alexis, we have a school-based business here in Brookings that's not run by YTP, and it's one of the coolest ones I've ever seen. It's a coffee shop, which lots of people have, but it raises money for Aspire and for field trips and stuff for college tours, which is what we want all our kids to be able to get to go and do as well. And so I've partnered with them. It's not run by YTP, but YTP students work in there alongside their Gen Ed peers, and the school district adopted a business class to go with that. So just an idea of how it's done outside of YTP. Definitely don't expect anyone to take anything like that on. Because that was their first question. You've got school-based businesses. Why don't you take this coffee shop? And I was like, nope, that's not mine. I've got my own. So, but it does work really, really well. And one of the things that we've partnered on is sometimes my students need a little bit more of like a script for training. So I helped build their training materials, which benefits all students, but predominantly my students at the time. And they were super, the person who runs the program was really excited to collaborate with me after that because I did things that were helpful. So just an idea. It's not easy to do in every school.
Yeah, it's kind of like the business has to exist already, and then the teacher has to be willing to partner with YTP. But the school that I'm at, we don't have a student-ran business, but that might change after COVID and we're back in session because I think teachers have a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
And I've been talking with them, so.
I don't want to miss Martha's question. It didn't compute though when I was trying to share my screen. What was Martha's question?
Martha, why don't you go ahead or do you want me to read it?
I was just really kind of thinking, if we're really talking about integration, true integration, and we're talking about truly non-sheltered workshops, then these paid positions should be allowed for any student to apply for. Otherwise, we're just really setting it up just for students with disabilities or students who qualify, which really isn't true integration. I get it, I understand why, but I'm playing a little bit of the devil's advocate here on this. Especially if you have any kind of pushback saying, well, so if my child is identified, then they get to have this?
I think that the hope and stretch of that thinking is that it isn't just student-run businesses, which is where I think we get into the closest trouble with mock sheltered workshops, but some districts are, for instance, like partnering with local businesses, almost like a duplicate of what the RFA is doing. So say you have an Ace Hardware in your neighborhood, you're reaching out, you have a relationship with them. You're saying, hey, can you take this student on for the summer, but we'll go ahead and pay them for these couple of weeks for this paid work experience or internship or whatever you want, whatever your district calls it. So it isn't just that you're creating something within your district only. It's more intended that you're looking outside of the district too for partners that help it be truly integrated as well.
We use
But
it.
those, I mean, everything's, none of it's easy. It's all complicated, but.
Yeah, from what I've heard here today, it doesn't seem like it's so much that happening. It's more that the districts are hiring the people and putting them to work somewhere in their district and then hoping to hire them, which we did in Redmond as well. But I mean, that seems to be kind of the thinking is like, okay, well, we can create these opportunities within our district. We can hire these kids and then hopefully get them, and to me, that is pretty dang close to a sheltered workshop. First of all, but second of all, it seems to be also really, again, not truly competitive and integrated because who's getting the chance to apply for those students who are in YTP and not all students.
These experiences don't have to be competitive, they have to be integrated. They're non-competitive because the funding is only for a targeted population. And other school districts that have shared today also gave us examples of how they integrate them in various departments across their schools where they work alongside other people, not just students, other employees. So I think we have that integration at that level where they work with people who are most likely not necessarily disabled or not in their position because of their disability, interacting across the populations in the school districts.
Okay, that helps.
We do it as a training for the student, so they're getting trained on the job that they want to do. So we are paying them for their training, and part of that is learning how to apply for a job, going through the whole steps of filling out applications and doing all the stuff that you need, and then training for the job that they want. So it's not like a group of students that were, you know, going out and doing this job with. It's a very specific like on the job training for the student. They're just getting paid for it instead of having it be a volunteer.
And it's what they want to do too, which is what's really important. It goes to their employment goals. Pam Kretschmer had a good one. If they are hired within the school district, they're working alongside employees with and without disabilities. So that kind of covers that. And say Kathy Morris said same in the community. Somebody had a good question about if a student, I think it would depend on your district. Can that money be used to employ a student who has already graduated but is in VR and wants to come back and work in the cafeteria at the school? I think that would be up to your, that's kind of convoluted. I don't know, what do you think, Michelle?
Right now, hearing that, it doesn't sound weird. It doesn't sound right to me, but I would need to think a little bit more about it. So I want to understand a little bit more, but I also think given time that we probably need to move on and come back to some of these.
If a student was already in VR, VR should be paying for that, not your grant.
Yeah. So I kind of want to button that one up. I know there's going to be lots of continuing questions.
Bottom of the questions here from the chat, and I could, if I missed somebody, let us know at the very end. This is similar to the internships for YTP students in SWIFT. I think some of you are overthinking this. There are paid specific internships instead of volunteer work. So that's a good point, Eileen. Yep.
I have a quick question based on what the other question was. It's about what if a graduate, I mean, not to come back in the district, but can we pay high or like their internship? Like not to come back to work to the district, but hire, like pay him if we place him on an internship.
I think I would want to know a little bit more about the specific situation there. Yeah, I don't want to get down to like student level questions and things here because I just don't want to mislead anybody. And we have a little bit more content to get through, and I want to make sure we have time for questions about things other than paying students. So
okay.
Now, I don't mean to cut you off, but I do want to get forward through this, and then we can help individual sites to answer individual questions like that at a later time, if not during the negotiation meeting. Okay, let's see here. Whoops. So all your forms that you need are on the University of Oregon YTP website. There are more than 4 forms there because there's 2 different letters of support up here. And we added an overview checklist, which if you're somebody who just likes all the steps on one sheet and you like to check, there's now a checklist on here for you too. So hopefully that's helpful. Okay, February 12th. Submit those 4 required documents to me just via email. We welcome early submissions if you're able, but no pressure if not. We want to have all of our negotiation meetings completed by March 31st. And they can start as soon as documents are submitted. We have one scheduled for the end of this month already. Woohoo! no more than 90 minutes. They don't need to be 90 minutes long, but we're going to go ahead and start with that as a default. And we want to just discuss your reflection questions, any clarifying questions, and then update the budgets as needed. So land on an agreement about that. The agenda for these meetings will just be, quickly, just so you know what to expect. Introductions, verify all of our directory and contact info. We want to talk about the budget first, in case budget folks are there and need to maybe leave. And then we want to go into the programmatic stuff. So just talking about your benchmarks, how things are going, how your core team's functioning, identify needs and priorities for 21-23. For sure, we need YTP statewide coordinator. That's me there. Technical assistance provider will be there, and school administrator will be there. Those are the required folks. Recommended is also your budget office representative in case there's any strange budget questions that come up. We can clarify them right then and there. And then also YTP transition specialist. We would love for them to be there. That doesn't always happen, but we certainly recommend it. And then others are welcome as you see fit.
Somebody asked, can you send email the on-screen presentation? This will all be on the YTP website. The recording of this community of practice and Michelle's PowerPoint will also be on there. So you can get all this information on the YTP website. Takes a day or so to get on there.
Thank you, Mary Jo.
There was also a question on the student base, how to calculate it, I believe. I'd love to hear about the student base and if the calculation has changed or been modified.
It has not. So we're going to use the same calculations as this biennium. And if you don't have access to that chart, which we found ourselves was a little bit tricky to find, we can send that out again. But if we're not expanding at all, then maybe you'd be looking at just the same student base unless you're thinking about reducing. So we can get that out to folks. Thank you. June 25th, we want all the forms signed. Signatures are required before work can begin on July 1st. Yes, e-signatures are acceptable. And then we celebrate and get ready for another wonderful year of services. We do have some announcements, but okay. I want to save about 5 minutes at the end for announcements, but now is Q&A about other things, process, timeline, forms.
I'm just looking through here. I think people have, look at the chat. There's other people have written some good suggestions to other people's questions.
Joyce has her hand raised. Joyce, you want to go?
Wait, Joyce, go for it, girl.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
This is Joyce from Springfield. I just was wondering I don't know which form it is, but when it says how many YTP participants are engaged in employment or training during this biennium, does that count the students that don't count for this biennium? The students from the previous biennium?
Yes. So it's right here. You have your previous and your current.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure. So it's the total of that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if you delineate it out into previous and current, that's nice because it'll probably be a question that comes up. But
just back up there for a second, Michelle.
Wait, it's engaged in employment.
Who were
engaged.
Not all students who were engaged in the previous biennium were necessarily engaged in the current biennium. So you need to look at your detail reports and make sure that your students are engaged at one point during the current biennium.
Right. So we would actually be looking at something that's not on her screen right now, right?
Correct.
It would be the It would be like the engaged at exit, blah, blah, blah. So I count up those total of all of them, right?
And it's go.
I was just going to say, remember, even though you don't see it in the database right now, carryover counts this biennium. So include previous and current.
Perfect. Thank you.
I don't know who this person is. In the list of required attendees, school administrator is listed. Are you referring to our school principal or someone from your office? It seems like it would be obvious, but we've never had school principal involved in the meeting for the grant because it's administered by the district office.
A district office admin is fine too. Just somebody with program, there's usually an admin who oversees the program identified for that. And you just want that person there so that they can understand the needs, the priorities, and help programmatically support it. And then also allocate the budget appropriately.
I would think it would be the person that signs as that person in the grant.
Not always.
So,
Well,
yeah. Minimally, yes, that would be like if you don't know who to ask, and that's really common because there's a lot of turnover and lots of shuffling. If you don't know who to ask, if you have your last grant, whoever signed it, if you don't have access to it, you can email me and I have the signatures from that last round saved somewhere. Your TAP actually has them too, I believe, in the share drive. So we can get that for you if you're having a hard time identifying which administrator should be there.
like Michelle just said, it in our district, it's the special ed coordinator. Everybody's looks different in many different sites. I think just speak out if you have a question here. That's all that, or if I happen to have missed you on here, I don't think I did, but I very easily could have.
I have a question, and it goes back to what Joyce was talking about. Are we, when we're looking at that database, are you wanting us to include the rollover, not just the previous is more than what our rollover is? Does that make sense? So when you're asking those questions, you want it based on our current plus the rollover, not necessarily the whole previous.
Right, because the previous is 4 years. So you need to go back and look at the 2 years.
Like what we were doing.
Rollover, right.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, so we have some announcements.
I got one here. Our district's allowed to change indirect expense on this grant. Question mark.
It's not prohibited at this point, but we would just talk about it site by site. Yes, Joyce?
Hello. Okay, sorry. Isn't there actually a section now specifically for indirects in there?
Yes.
Whereas before it previously wasn't in there. There wasn't like a section. I just threw it in, I think, other.
Other, okay.
But now there is specifically a section, right? So
I have to look.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's at the very bottom of the budget sheet.
Okay.
Joyce, do you use the rate that you determine through the Oregon Department of Education then that you would use like for your title grants? Is that the rate you use when you have charged indirect in the past?
I use the rate that my lovely budget person gives me.
Lovely.
Yeah, I don't know where she gets it from.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Okay, announcements. The technical assistance provider position is posted. So that is really, really exciting. And we want folks to know if you're interested, if you know people who are interested, please share this. And please apply soon because we are hoping to do interviews next week. It came out over the holiday break, so I know it probably missed a bunch of people's radar, but we want to make sure everybody knows about that. And you can get to the link from the U of O YTP website. OSTC is coming up. It's going to be the first and second week of April, spanning across 6 days, a combination of synchronous and asynchronous sessions. It's $50 per participant. The call for presenters, if you're interested in doing a session, is due this Friday. And then award nominations are due the 26th of January, and please submit. All of that information can be found on the OSTC website. Mary Jo, do you have anything else to share right there?
No, just that I'll put the website on there.
In the chat. Awesome.
Michelle, in the past, sometimes the ODE has offered some funding for teachers to attend that. Is that the case this year, or anybody that we want to participate needs to pay $50?
It is my understanding, what I thought I heard reiterated earlier today was $50 for any participant.
Okay.
But you could be using, I didn't see who just asked that. Susan, was that you?
Yes.
You could be using your leftover money from this year for people to go to the conference. So if you have money left in your budget and you've got 4 teachers and they have $200, sign those teachers up using your YTP.
Right. Sometimes
reserves.
had put money in for additional team members to go to the conference, and then ODE offered to pay. So I just wanted to clarify before I went forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I will talk to you more about what is OSTC. If you guys want to go to, I forget, there's many new transition specialists who in this last year and don't know what it is. Go to that website, and Joyce, Oregon Statewide Transition Conference is great. Go to the website and then talk with your TAP, or email me, Mary Jo, if you have any other questions about it.
We have 2 raised hands. Joyce and Kathy Morris.
I can go. My question is there a schedule? I know it's going to be like some days it's going to be in the morning and some days it's in the afternoon. Is that schedule up yet? And if not, how soon will that be out?
Well, the call for presenters isn't even due till the 15th, so we don't know that yet, who's presenting and when. Registration just opened last week, so we've got until the 1st of April. That will be up as soon as we get the call for papers in for presenters. Then we will be looking at, how many ever we get and selecting those, and then that will be out as soon as we can. So it'll be on. Keep checking the website, and that information will be on there.
This is Margie Blackmore, just to piggyback up on that. There is a schedule, but the sessions aren't in there, but you can kind of see how the conference will be laid out.
Thanks, Margie.
Yeah.
I went to that earlier, and it wasn't on there laid out that well.
It is embedded in the Powtoon.
Powtoon, exactly. Go to the Powtoon.
Yeah,
Okay.
There's some cool stuff on the website. There's a little video that's 2 or 3 minutes that talks about the schedule, and it's worth watching. So I would go to the website and see what's there.
That's the Powtoon.
Mm-hmm.
I've just learned that new word, Powtoon. I didn't know what that was.
Okay, and then very quickly, just thanks to those who are getting their budget amendments in. Please keep those coming in and let us know if you have questions. Schedule-wise, I'm putting into my calendar 1 or 2 times a week to review those. So there's going to be a little bit of a delay in getting it back to you, but just stay in good open communication because we want you to spend your money.
Michelle, I have a quick question. This is Lori Brownville. Where did you say the checklist was at on the website?
It's under, so it's going to be under resources, past events or something. I forget what it's called. Community of practice from December.
That's what I thought you said. Okay. Yep. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's actually under the January one, not the December.
Why, thank you so much, Garrett. Under the January one, not December.
Thank you very much, Garrett.
Michelle, if you are still looking, or if anyone's looking for the student base, how to count that, how to figure out that, it's actually under the last bienniums, the 2019 to 21. It's on page 22 in the request for grant purchase. So I mean, if anyone has access to that, they can just get that right out.
Thank you.
Yeah, and actually I have a question about under supplies, where it says other it says instructional supply cost and then support supply cost. I always write in just like what we're going to do with the monies, but I'm not quite sure. How do you differentiate? Are they asking instructional as in purchasing, instruction material? Just that separate than all your other supplies, or?
Yes.
For me, I'm having a hard time differentiating that.
It's more for, okay, so from like a grant perspective, it doesn't really matter all that much, but from the business office, it's coded differently often in how they, what they charge against in their line items at the school district level. So instructional is a certain code, and then supply is a certain code, or other is a certain code. So,
right. And I get that, but when I talked to my business manager, he said, well, ask them in that meeting what goes under.
From my experience, when it's instructional, it might be curriculum, it might be professional development, trainings, things like that, although training is separate. And then other could be your computer, your phone. Does that make sense? Like more those sorts of things.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then I just want to say, since we have a wider audience on here today, community practice is always open for everybody. It's the second Monday of each month, 2 to 3. And the February one is going to be highlights from the employment department. So admin or teachers or even business folks, if you ever wanted to join, you're welcome to join. That's it.
So Michelle, just a quick question about the budget amendments. So basically we want to figure at least a 2-week window depending on when you turn it in. Is that kind of? Okay.
Yes. Now, if you put something like, this is a hot potato, I really need to know, then I'll do my very best to make time and get back to you like extremely quickly. But that's my natural rhythm that I'm building in, if that makes sense.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Michelle, can you remind us what the deadline was for getting those amendments in?
There isn't really a deadline. It just all needs to be spent by the end of June.
Okay.
And so I know in schools, it feels like that's really forever away with everything else you have going on. So I expect they'll just keep on trickling in. But you'll just be able to use the money more creatively the earlier you submit it and get approval.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? We are at 3 o'clock.
Is the next community of practice February 8th? That's the second Monday. Yep. That's it.
Thanks everybody so much for your understanding, your patience, your time, your questions. And we will see you soon. Negotiation meetings. Look forward to seeing you.
Call. If you have questions, we can talk to you about the grant or the IGA this time, which is lovely.
Thank you. Bye. See you next month.
Great conversation with everyone.
Thanks. You're right. There is a lot of energy around the questions with students. To be expected. It's all
I have a question.
Oh, hi, Cynthia.
Hi, I just have a question for the presenters. This is for the conference, but for the presenters, do we have to have something submitted to you, like the presentation to you by the 15th?
You go to the OregonSTC.org website, and there's a form. If you go present, you click on that, and then it takes you to a link to complete your submission, and that's all you have to do.
And they're not asking for your presentation right now. It's just an application, so it's pretty easy to fill out.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm still thinking about presenting. I'm not sure. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't have to have the presentation the 15th because it's not ready.
No, just your description of it.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. Thanks for asking, Cynthia. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Cynthia.
Bye.
There's one more person left. Who is it? No.
Are we still recording and should we stop?
Yes.